Good afternoon and welcome to this CDMO panel discussion. My name is Kay Nakai. I'm one of the senior healthcare analysts here at Chardan. Joining me on this panel are representatives from 4 CDMO companies: Audrey Greenberg, Chief Business Officer, SK Pharmteco; Benham Bagbajarani, VP Sales and Program Management at Lonza; Andy Holt, Chief Business Officer at ViralGen; and Scott Law, Chief Operations Officer at Ascend Advanced Therapies. Welcome and thank you for being with us today. Just as a reminder to attendees, if you'd like to ask a question of our panelists, please type it into the question box under the video player. To start, let me ask each of you to please briefly introduce yourselves and your companies and manufacturing capabilities. Audrey, let me start with you.
Hi, good afternoon. Audrey Greenberg, SK Pharmteco. We are a global CDMO with locations in Ireland, Korea, France, and the US. We have capabilities that include both small molecule chemical synthesis as well as cell and gene therapy. Our plant here that I'm sitting in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, is the largest single site cell and gene therapy manufacturing organization with plasmid, cell therapy, vector, and all the wraparound testing and analytics in one site. So really pleased to be here today. I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Great. Andy?
Hey, everybody. Kay, thanks for having me on. My name is Andy Holt. I'm the CCO for ViralGen. We're a AAV-focused CDMO with facilities in Spain. Started out life as a joint venture, and now we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Bayer after a transaction in 2020. So we've got platform-driven AAV manufacturing is kind of the jam. So we've been around since 2017, trying to make the best AAV we can.
Great. Benham?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for the session. Benham Bagbadrani, VP of Sales and Commercial Program Management for Lonza Cell and Gene Technologies. As you might know, Lonza is a leading CDMO focused on a wide range of applications: biologics, small molecules, antibodies. We've been on the cell and gene therapy space for more than 15 years now, focusing on a wide range of modalities: autologous, allogeneic cell therapies, viral vector gene therapies, and exosome services. I'm happy to be here and have a productive conversation.
Great. And Scott?
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to join the panel. Scott Law, I'm the Chief Operations Officer for here at Ascend. Ascend is a multinational CDMO that specializes in AAV production. So we have facilities in Munich, and most recently we acquired a facility in Alachua, Florida.
Well, great. Well, we always like to take the opportunity at this conference to get a check on the state of the union, so to speak, from the perspective of the CDMOs. Certainly one topic that always comes up at this conference is make versus buy, which is an important decision for small biotech companies. At that highest level with scarce capital, why build CGMP instead of using the funds to invest in clinical development? And while one can certainly model cost and calculate break even, there are other important factors that essentially amount to having more control over your own destiny that are more difficult to quantify in a financial analysis. 3-4 years ago at this conference, the clear consensus was that there was a backlog as demand for cell and gene therapy manufacturing services was exceeding supply. Fast forward to today, clearly there's more capacity, but we are just starting to emerge from, say, a 2-year plus environment where the cost of capital has been much more expensive. And in response, we've seen many development stage companies announce strategic initiatives designed to extend their current cash runways. With this, the balance has moved in favor of buy over make. So what I hope to achieve in this discussion is to understand how CDMOs are adjusting and improving their businesses to better meet the current needs of customers and to further enlarge their share and importance within the manufacturing landscape for cell and gene therapies going forward. So Audrey, let me ask you first, in your view, what is the state of the market for cell and gene therapy manufacturing?
Well, you summed it up quite nicely, actually. There's been a sort of a shift in perspective in terms of captive capacity versus outsourced manufacturing. We've certainly seen the increase in percentages, even though the pool may have shrank slightly in 2022, 2023 with the number of companies and programs out there. Certainly the percentage that outsource has increased given the capital markets that you're describing. For us at Center for Breakthrough Medicines and SK Pharmteco, it's really about providing the continuum of services throughout a company or a therapy's life cycle. So we're able to service the early stage companies that may need cell lines or platform processes, or even maybe development of certain things. We have a robust R&D team that can help them as well. And then obviously later stage companies that want to outsource commercialized products. So what does that mean? How do you provide all of that in one location or in one company? And it's about having commercial ready suites that can service a program early. It's about having a team that understands, by the way, not only the manufacturing, but also analytical development, which is one of the key things that have been holding up a lot of these therapies approvals. So understanding the FDA guidelines, understanding the shift changes that are occurring out there, providing a continuum of services, certainly at all stages. And then lastly, I would say, and probably most important in today's environment, is having flexible contracting terms and ways of working with customers. There is not a linear path right now, nor is there ever, by the way, to approval, but certainly in times like this, when you're talking about cash constraints and issues with capital markets, being able to work with your clients in a way that helps them get to the next value inflection point without diluting their capital stack too much is super important. So we've been there with our clients, working with them flexibly on our contracts.
And Beto, let me ask you the same question. What's the view from Lonza's perspective?
Yeah, I think as rightfully mentioned in your summary as well, there is a shift in the market probably from optimism, early optimism, into a slowdown, and now we see that the market is moving towards more commercial viability, and this is actually very positive news for the industry. I think that in this journey, it is important for our customers to be able to experience flexibility, but absolutely expertise and experience that is required to navigate them from early clinical towards the commercial. So definitely commercial viability is going to be the key. Now, what is going to be important is to make sure that there is robustness and GMP readiness to de-risk the GMP for early phase focuses, but then path to commercialization, which will require robustness of the processes, rightfully as mentioned earlier, the type of analytics and robustness of analytics, but having a strong sense of quality and quality system to make sure that the commercial viability can be achieved. And here one would need to rely on the CDMOs that have the experience to make this happen, de-risk the manufacturing, but then enable the commercial viability. Obviously, flexibility, suite availability, commercialization readiness, and audit readiness are going to be the key topics that I believe that at Lonza, that's one of the key focuses that we've had with multiple type of the offering that we've had for early clinical and the commercial offered across the globe in different areas for different applications.
And Scott, as the newest kid on the block, what does Ascend and your investors think about this being the right time to establish a new CDMO player?
Yeah, so great question. So as service levels and expectations have continued to change across the cell and gene therapy space, and our development partners also are requiring a lot more expertise at the CDMO, while they start divesting away from the facilities that they have built, and while they start divesting and raising cash back for doing their developmental platforms, we feel that it's the right time to come in through M&A activity, buy the expertise that the other panel members are talking about, making sure that you establish the CDMO that's also, like I said, based on the expertise of the marketplace, and that you're not just becoming a plug-and-play CDMO player. So we're looking for making sure we retain talent. So as we do M&A activity and acquire facilities, we're really acquiring the talent along with the facility. So.
Okay, great. Well, Andy, let me ask you to comment on what CDMOs are doing to push back on some of the key long-standing make versus buy arguments, such as control over timelines, control over process consistency and product quality, since it's the developer's product, they know it best, and preserving confidentiality of the developer's trade secrets.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, the trend that frankly I love at a little bit higher level is a maturation of what it means to be a CDMO, right? I've been in this field for a long time, got to work with Benham and some others on the, it's watching the kind of alignment of what the CDMO actually does, whether you want to call it the customer process or not, whether you want to call it the customer analytics and tech transfer and all those things that I got used to doing at other companies or not, and whether you want to have those really uncomfortable, unfortunate conversations as a CDMO player when a customer's process fails. Nobody enjoys that. But when the customer values manufacturing IP at the same level as they value their therapeutic IP, you end up with that situation. And so that's, we're not the only ones who did this. I'm proud of Virogen's role in pushing kind of platform first and to really challenge some of that status quo of your therapeutic, your molecule, your regulatory submission is going to be intrinsically linked to the work we perform, whether or not it's your process or whether it's our process. And if we can offer an enormous amount of value to you by the strength of historical data, right? Just being able to cross-link this batch of AAV8 to the last batch of AAV8, something that simple, or this batch of lentivirus to the last batch of lentivirus. I think most of our panelists here, if not all of them, would have sat in a room at one point or another and said, well, I know this process looks just like this other process, looks just like this other process. And we can't say anything because confidentiality is important. So we have to hint around about expertise, right? We have to like glance against these things rather than go straight at them. And it led to a reputation and a trend towards insourcing. Because if the CDMO is going to say it's your process and you're going to fail it, I'd rather fail at my own place. And if you can switch that paradigm and say, okay, CDMOs on paper or in practice own the delivery of the product, then you open up a much more mature conversation, a much more value-driven conversation, and a much happier place. Where I think all of us on the panel have been a part of that. I mean, the Center for Breakthrough Medicines and Ascend certainly are. Lonza's messaging over the last few years has really changed in cell and gene dramatically, right? And you see this trend with everybody trying to push to say CMC rests with the CDMO in a way that is fundamental. And so we have to improve. We have to show not ownership, because that's a problematic word, but we have to show control and we have to show real expertise in delivery, or else we're going to lose it. And I think that's what I've seen, especially coming out of the kind of the COVID run up, and is an opportunity for CDMOs to kind of quietly mature and quietly own what they've always been responsible for but danced away from. And it makes me a lot happier to be in this space as opposed to the last one.
Audrey, another criticism from some of our early attending company presentations who've chosen to build out their own manufacturing is that increased capacity does not translate into increased quality. So how would you push back on this?
Well, yeah, first of all, I agree. The capable capacity is huge. Just having a bunch of machines and GMP space doesn't help anyone unless you have people that operate it, that know what they're doing, and all the wraparound services, right? I mean, if you fall short in any one area, it takes out the whole thing. But supply chain primarily is one of the huge components of that. So look, I think about 3 years ago when I first looked at the statistics in terms of outsourcing rates, Vector is outsourced about 88% of the time, and cell and gene therapy about 50%, 55% of the time. And those numbers recently shifted to the positive, actually. And the reason for that, partially, I think, is because of the capital market. But it's also, look, a lot of these early stage companies are owned by VCs and private equity firms, and the IPO window. They used to be a premium was paid on valuation for companies that owned their own manufacturing capacity. And then you fast forward a couple of years and you've got all these companies sitting on vacant site, they can't hire the people, they can't retain the people. If they do hire them, they can't get any of the consumables, the equipment, you know, whatever it is. It's not just about the space. And then it just becomes, when you're looking at the numbers, it doesn't make any sense. So you're seeing an increase in outsourcing rates, but you're also seeing a lot of capacity on the line that maybe has the people, but they're not necessarily capable. So you need to hire an experienced CDMO. I mean, look, we all know this, but as a company that's doing due diligence, not just on make versus buy, but once you figure out you do want to buy, figuring out who that CDMO is, it's not just capabilities and expertise, it's also culture. What is the cultural fit? Are they going to be able to work with you? Like I said earlier, you know, it never goes as planned. So you need a CDMO that can, in a way that makes sense for them and their business model, but certainly work with you, because it's never easy. And I think last, one thing just to keep in mind is this new, and I'm sure you're going to be bringing this up later in discussion, but this concept of decentralized manufacturing and how we're all looking at that and how that plays into the centers of excellence for cancer treatment. How do we get the treatments closer to the patient so the families aren't burdened? Just all of these things, and the cost of the therapies and the reimbursement rates and what's happening as we get into wider spread indications, all of these things that we're all thinking about that are going to hit our bottom lines and impact either our top line or our bottom line as our industry continues to grow, and making sure we can accommodate the therapies and where they are.
Well, Scott, let me expand on something Audrey briefly touched on, and that's the lack of qualified workforce. You know, it kind of continues, especially in cell and gene therapy, given the challenges that people are trying to overcome, continues to be a constraint. So what is the Ascend strategy for attracting, developing, and retaining qualified manufacturing personnel?
Yeah, so great question. We tend to partner with, in areas that have local universities or local community colleges, we send up curriculums that will allow us to train a workforce that is specific to the cell and gene therapy space. We've all spent time in college, we've all spent time in college laboratories, but that never seems to transcend into the business world. So what we try to do is partner with the local universities, set up training programs and curricula to make sure that we're teaching them the right way to do things. We also tend to build training centers in our own facilities as we continue to expand, so that we bring people in, teach them how to, you know, as simple things as pipetting aseptically, entering in and out of a BSC, things like that, to ensure that those environmental factors that tend to get missed sometimes don't necessarily negatively impact the customer's processes.
Okay, and Andy, how do you address the workforce issue?
Well, I mean, everyone knows that San Sebastian, Spain is a global biotech hub, right? So the talent built itself. No, I'm just kidding. We love being in San Sebastian, but for the last 5 years, we've graduated 370 people from a university, a 3-year program. So we started that curriculum the day we started the company, and you know, in truth, it's really not a bad place to live. So we're able to recruit talent internationally pretty easy to San Sebastian. You know, when we look at globally where we expand into the US, talent base is a huge piece. And there's, I'm in North Carolina, there's programs like the BTech program that have churned out, you know, 20 years of biotech workers that, you know, frankly, we flew those guys over to San Sebastian. It wasn't hard. We were able to nurture a community of biotech there that's created other businesses. There's 5 or 6 other biotechs now that also hire those graduates that we financed the original piece of it. I think there's also part of it links back to process science, right? If you can optimize a process, close a process, automate a process, then the worker burden gets lower. The precision can be monitored more efficiently. I think you have to pick some battles there of like, I totally agree with Scott that having an operator who knows how to pipette is important. We spend a lot of time making sure operators don't have to pipette that much, right? The more robots we could have, the more automation we can have, and the more kind of leading indicators on the analytics we can have, the more efficient our workforce can be, even if they are trained. You know, we're still like 45% PhDs for a 500-person company, which when that's a lot. And it's more than probably we need, to be honest. But it also means that when something gets a little wonky, we have a PhD virologist that can jump in as a manufacturing lead. I think that's where we're trying to find the right balance. And I'm not sure we have it yet, but we want to create a stable talent pool in our region. We want to be a great place to work and to grow. And then we want to make sure that we nurture kind of science and process science as separate and parallel things so that we can minimize the sort of when stuff does go wrong, like Audrey was saying, it can go wrong and we can contain the storm a little bit more. And that's kind of how we've approached it. I think we're also, compared to some of my colleagues on the panel, cheating a little bit. When we run essentially one process over and over, we do have an easier burden of operator training than certainly like Benham does, running 15 different kinds of cell and gene therapies, or Audrey with, it's important to acknowledge the complexity and the choices we've made on market. I have it a little easier than they do, for sure.
Okay, great. So this next question really is kind of a two-parter. The first part I'll address to Benham. Breadth and depth of experience provides numerous advantages, obviously having an established track record, but frankly, also the ability to learn from past experiences. So Benham, what type of demand are you seeing from customers with late-stage assets who may be looking to supplement their internal manufacturing capacity using a CDMO, CGMP?
Just to clarify, the question you're asking is with respect to the type of modality or the commercialization stuff?
Well, both. But are you seeing, increased demand as companies move towards commercialization to want to augment what they're doing with some additional CDMO help?
Yeah, definitely. I think we do see more increased demand in terms of the companies who are moving towards late stage commercial. Just to mention Lonza, we already have 3 commercial products, and we are targeting to have at least 7 commercial products by the end of the year. The areas that we see that the CDMOs can bring experience to the table is essentially the commercialization readiness, even understanding of how to move towards the commercial, making sure that you have the right expertise, focusing on FMEA type of approach, failure mode and effect analysis, to make sure that you set proper commercialization strategy. What does it look like when we say commercial ready in terms of characterization, robustness of assays, assay validation packages, all the way to pre-PPQ and PPQ packages? Because let's be honest and clear that cell and gene therapy, as rightfully mentioned, there is already a lot of expectation, but there is not a lot of experience also when it comes to the late stage commercialization. Yes, one could learn and apply from other modalities, other applications. Biologics have certainly already gone beyond the path that we have in front of us, but also there are a lot of nuances when it comes to the cell and gene therapies, depending on the modalities, unit operations, as Andy and Audrey also highlighted rightfully. We still have a lot of areas to learn about the reducing open manual unit operations, building automation into the CMC, having the right analytical methods. So working with the CDMOs who know how to put together the milestone and a strategy when it comes to the commercialization and commercialization readiness, now also having experience to work on all these challenging areas around the process, around the new technologies and automation and analytics, is going to be critical. And that's where we are actually tapping into the quality system that we have across the network. When is needed, we leverage that quality. When the expertise is needed, we tap into the expertise that we have on our cell and gene therapies, and hopefully we are able to help the customers to move to the next steps.
Great. And Andy, at the other end of the development cycle, what are some of the common mistakes that early biotechs have made that you try to persuade those who are coming to you now not to repeat? And maybe, for the investors in our audience who are investing or looking to invest in these early stage biotechs, what questions should they be asking their companies about how they're thinking about these things?
Oh yeah, there's nothing more pleasant than telling somebody who's been working on a therapy for 12 years that it's all screwed up and we have to fix it before they can touch GM. That always goes great. Never never happens. No, I think that's where, you heard a couple people talk about kind of analytics and our understanding and maturity of understanding around what actually makes these therapies work and doesn't is still very much in flux and very much in process. I think if you put some of our process development folks and kind of construct optimization team, which is a service that we're offering to people just from a manufacturability perspective, down in the weeds, the structure and size of the ITRs of an AAV and whether a mutation in the 3' end matters or not, you'd have a fight internally at Virogen about that question, let alone out in the industry. And I think when you look at things like capsid choice and strength of promoter, size of the construct, even some of the really basic stuff where we have a conversation every 3 weeks about somebody who wants to shove 6 kb into an AAV and then wants to blame us when it doesn't manufacture, right? There's some of these basic pieces that we are learning more and more what happens when you push these things into large scale manufacturing. Whether it's empty full ratios, whether it's construct size, whether it's promoter strength, we try to really engage, and this is one of those from a business strategy perspective. It's a fascinating question that you're probably not going to get a second chance at it down the road. Once they get into humans, we're working on the comparability question, but probably not. And I think we all know there are some products that have been approved now that look pretty mediocre by modern manufacturing standards. And we want to prevent that as much as we can. So I think we try to get to them early. We love working with investors. We have a couple of kind of strategic deals with investment groups to get an early view on the constructs coming through their pipelines. And to say, hey, if you get a chance, tell them these 3 things. Let's look at size. Let's look at that capsid. Let's look at ITR confirmations. There's a few other minor points, but those are big ones that are fairly easy to fix and fairly easy to fix with publicly available resources. So the more we can plug into that early stage, basically it's a little bit selfish. It just solves headaches for us 2.5 years down the road when we're prepping phase 2, phase 3 batches.
Okay, great. Audrey, want to expand on something you touched on earlier, and that is, with smaller companies looking to extend cash, we would assume that they're even more price sensitive. So to what extent are you seeing increased demands for price for performance clauses or guaranteed yields? And help us understand some of the trade-offs customers would need to commit to in order for you to agree to something like that.
That's a fantastic question. I mean, I think the contracting terms have changed over the last 5 years when you went from the supply demand balance that existed years back, and people trying to tie up capacity, putting huge upfront payments and things like that, to having a little bit, at least on the vector front, some excess capacity. Not so much on cell therapy, by the way. So those 2 things are very, very different in 2 different markets. So I bring that up because that impacts the contracts. So it's how much leverage do you have in terms of other alternatives, and how much capacity does the CDMO have? And by the way, each one of us are different and can negotiate differently based on what our capacity is and our experience in a particular serotype or capsid. I think that for us, it is, and I'm going to state the obvious, but it's all about the relationship. And our strong relationships where we have good mutual trust, because it has to go both ways, we can be a little bit more flexible. But if there's a relationship with that, for whatever reason, comes with risk, and that could come in many different forms, whether it's the process, whether it's their financial situation, other things. We may not be as flexible with the contracting terms. So we do our best to meet the customer and the client where they're at, and we really look at what a long-term relationship on both sides. It's hard to switch. We all know switching costs are enormous. So we all want to be on the same page here. But I will say, to give you a blunt answer, we have seen an increase in those terms that you're mentioning, in terms of, you know, everyone trying to protect their risk. And it comes with sort of the market dynamic that we're in right now.
Okay, great. Scott, we have seen an increase in M&A within the sector. Obviously, your recent acquisition of Beacon's GMP AAV facility being one of the most recent. What do you think is driving this trend, and do you expect it to continue?
Yeah, so, you know, I believe it's going to continue. I believe that as the developers are going to continue to divest from their capital facilities that they've bought in or created and developed and designed and constructed in the past, as they realize what the cost of running these facilities really is, and that it is a constant hit on their financial runway, that you're going to see a continued divestiture from those facilities, and that opens up, you know, for companies like Ascend to continue to buy those facilities up, buy the talent pool, and ensure that you know, we start keeping the capacity where it needs to be. I think that, you know, the industry misunderstood back in the day. They misunderstood how much it really costs to keep a facility open and operational when you're in a development platform of a single or maybe multiple products that you're looking to do, when you're in that a licensing phase, or that all of those times where you don't have long shelf lives, you don't have long ways to really build a commercial stock because you don't have shelf life experience and all those fun things. So you essentially have a facility being operated or kept in a state of GMP compliance for multiple years at a time while you're in the regulatory review cycles.
And Audrey, having been at a company that was acquired, what is your perspective?
I mean, it's good to have deep pockets. I'll tell you that. Feeling the late nights of making payroll and worrying about things that should be just happening as part of your due course are incredibly stressful. So having a partner like SK, a second largest company in South Korea, they are invested across many different industries, including, you know, batteries and semiconductors, and biotech is one of their huge initiatives, including obviously pharma services and in particular cell and gene therapy. So they are in it for the long run. It's great to have a strategic investor as opposed to a sponsor. Not that we don't like sponsors, but they tend to be flippers. So we like our long-term relationship. And I think for the biotechs out there that are looking to either license technology, raise capital, look for a partnership in some way to help them get to their next milestone. I mean, my beggars can't be choosers, I guess, but to some extent, please partner with someone that has your long-term interests at heart, and perhaps even someone that has a good strategic fit with you, because that will limit the headaches down the road. And certainly for us, we're lucky in that regard, and we obviously look toward a very bright future with SK.
Great. Andy, an ongoing goal for the field is to lower the cost of goods of cell and gene therapies. So how are you achieving this in ViroGen, and how do you think the field is going to achieve this?
I mean, I think we've got it all figured out. I'm just kidding. I think, you know,
Andy's got a future in stand-up, I think.
If you're bald, you got to be funny, right? If it's not going to be looks and intelligence, you got to get by with something else. So that's what I got. That's what I got left in the deck, Audrey. No, I mean, I think I have faith in both our internal teams and in the industry generally that there's enormous efficiency still to be gained and enormous productivity still to be gained in the bottom line, you know, tighter question. In our own hands, you know, it says something that, like, with AAV2. We have a big Parkinson's project with AAV2. AAV2 is nobody's favorite vector to make. We set our team to the task of figuring out how to make AAV2 affordable for Parkinson's, and 18 months later, we were about 33 times better than we were at it before. You could easily say that means we were pretty bad at it before. I don't think we were pretty bad at it before. But it's a well-producing vector for us now. And that was a combination of upstream enhancements and downstream purification techniques, as well as operational efficiencies. And I think when we look at any of these problems, you know, whether it's a heart failure customer that has to have a cost of goods below 10,000 a dose to be viable, or you get into the really crazy ones like, you know, some of the osteoarthritis or other applications where they really need to be like below 2,000 a dose to be viable. It's eating the elephant, right? It's let the science continue to mature. Let's look at cell densities. Let's look at feed strategies. Let's look at better purification, and then let's set ourselves to the task of running really efficient operations. I mean, that's for us. One of the pieces after we got bought by Bayer a few years ago, you know, they have a few folks who know how to run large scale projects. And so we've been able to steal a few guys down from Berlin and Wuppertal to come just look at operational efficiencies. And once you really get down in the weeds and you make more batches, you run more efficient, you can lower prices because you start to defray those really obnoxious indirect costs of running a large scale GMP facility more efficiently. And so I think it's a science problem, but it's also an engineering problem. And we know we can do better, and we're luckily as good capitalists, we're also well incentivized to do better because we're competing with people who are also trying to do better. And the thing that makes me really happy about it is like, I know we will get there. I can see how we'll get there through the techniques we have in hand. And when we do, we also unlock profitability for rare disease, and we unlock profitability for very unmet needs that I think we have an obligation to chase. You know, it's nice when the solution helps everybody, right? It helps the folks trying to go after huge pathway diseases and take over the world with gene therapy, and it helps the, you know, diseases with 50 people in the world that they're just trying to eradicate this debilitating genetic condition off the face of the earth. But the answer is all the same, right? Just better upstream, more efficient downstream, more operational efficiency. And there's so much room to go on all three of those buckets, at least at Virogen. If everybody else on the panel has it perfected, then we're playing catch up, but I suspect it's not the case.
Okay, great.
Platform analytics, add that in there.
Just maybe I wanted to comment on this because this question is actually close to my heart. I've been for the last 20 years developing cell and gene therapies, and I think it's time for cell and gene therapy industry to focus on reducing the cost of therapies, reducing the cost to make these cell and gene therapies widely accessible and affordable. And to what Andy mentioned, I would like to also add that it's time to focus a little bit more on the automation, having robust and reliable platforms, but also bring automation back to the table. And here, the focus is not just with the CDMO, also technology developers. When it comes to the scaling of the process, we need to see more reliable technology, a scale out and a scale up, building analytics into the process. PAT is becoming a hot topic. So and you would not be able to take one approach or focus on one area. There has to be multiple areas to be addressed around the process, around the analytics, building automation, reducing the footprint, reducing the open manual unit operations that increase the cost of therapies, not only from GMP and reducing the number of deviations, but also the path to commercialization, being able to address the process characterization needs and moving into the process validation stage. So and obviously the testing and release. let's not underestimate the importance of the analytics and the time spent, especially for some of these modalities, autologous cell and gene therapies. The time that is needed to do the testing, review, and release the product could be significant. So multiple angles that needs to be addressed, and it's time for everybody to come together, sponsors, CDMOs, and technology developers, alongside the regulatory agencies, to help and reduce to make these these therapies commercially viable and more accessible to the patients.
Well, great. Well, a follow-up thing I want to touch on is the potential disruptive event, which is the proposed BioSecure Act legislation. So, Audrey, let me start with you. What is SK doing to prepare for the possible ramifications of this?
Well, it's good to have excess capacity right now. I will say that, and certainly, obviously, as I mentioned, capable capacity. But we're in the backyard of one of these impacted organizations. We are in Philadelphia, in the epicenter of cell and gene therapy, the birthplace of cell and gene therapy. There are companies being spun out of Penn every day. New Carl June entities and Jim Wilson and everybody else, Stuart Weissman. I think it's important to look, I think it's unfortunate, to be honest, for some of these companies, but we're the recipient of this decision that's been made, and certainly the accusation that intellectual property has been stolen is incredibly upsetting. This industry is about trust. These therapies are the make or break success of these companies. To steal IP is criminal. I obviously don't have any of the evidence that this accusation is behind, but I think, look, the CDMOs play a crucial role, and we have to be the most ethical that we can be. And so you have to have that in place, obviously. That's table stakes. But then you need to have the goods, right? You have to be able to deliver on time, in full. You have to have a relationship with these clients that makes them feel comfortable and makes them understand that they can trust you. So that's what we bring to the table. And candidly, while it's upsetting to these organizations, I mean, I hate to say it's, beneficial for the folks on this call, just being as transparent as I can. When you take down capacity, it helps us all. But and I think given the market, it's unfortunate for the therapeutic developers that made the decision to manufacture at some of these entities, because it's going to slow them down. So I think the sooner that they can make the decision to have a dual track strategy so that it doesn't impact them severely down the road is probably a good idea.
Great. And Benham, what about Lonza?
You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. No, I fully agree in terms of obviously IP and know-how is critical for CDMO. Transparency and maintaining confidentiality of the customers, because at the end of the day, we offer services to the customers. So maintaining their IP and confidentiality, and also obviously the organization IP and confidentiality is important. There are and that's where you need to build the trust and make sure that you operate on a very transparent manner. There are practical ways to do it. Obviously, everything goes into your MSA, your agreement on what is your IP, what is your sponsor IP. There might be also areas that are not black and white. You just need to define that properly. And luckily for us at Lonza, we faced these challenges many times across the network, across the globe, for other industries, and also for cell and gene therapies. It's true that we have nuances, but having the expertise of proper guidance and guidelines that are set by the global corporates would be very helpful to navigate through this process. At the end of the day, I think the key is transparency, flexibility, and making sure that you are focused on the target and you leverage the right IP and know-how for the right application, maintaining the confidentiality of the customer. Of course, there's no one way to do things, but there are multiple resources that come to play, and that's what we have been focusing on at Lonza.
Okay, well, great. Well, we've reached the end of our time here, but I want to thank all of you for joining us for this very informative panel. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.